We are live at Huston-Tillotson University here in the Seabrook Chapel tonight for this ATXpansion special. We have a live audience here with us. Some folks anxious with questions for our panel members and others, so we want to get right to them.
Katina McHenry.
Thank you, Robert and Leslie. We have a lot of people in the audience that have lived in Austin for a very long time. They're longtime Austinites that, of course, have seen the growth and the expansion throughout the city, so they have very specific questions tonight. Malvin Wren is our first one. Good evening.
But my question was based upon, they asked the question how many people want to see it, and then you didn't ask the question how many people don't want to see it. At present, based upon the history of Austin, Mike Martinez mentioned the 1928 divide, and the fact that you have to have inclusiveness as well as an overall comprehensive plan for total transportation. Present transportation is based upon a historical design that started back in 1928. So you bus people from East Austin downtown, and then you disperse them. So it means the average person going from East Austin to work up there in the northwest part of Austin take an hour to an hour and a half, versus crosstown would allow them to go. So when one starts talking about rail and those kinds of things, I grew up in Philadelphia, so therefore I understand rail. I go to Chicago and all these different cities, even been some of the southern cities. Their rail was designed around a comprehensive plan of transportation of how you move. So in today's environment, how people like myself that are saying no, if I've got to look at the present different council, I've got to look at the history of Austin, and my feeling is, no, let's pull together the total votes to vote it down, because we don't have inclusiveness, we don't have involvement of all of the citizenry, and we're not looking at the history of Austin to come up with a comprehensive plan to address those historical needs of the community, nor are we looking at the fact that when you look out on 290 now, you've got people coming in, I've got a flow of traffic, and light rail is not going to address that.
What's your specific question?
My specific question was on the basis of looking at the no side of the question. Right. How do we look at the no side of the question to get back to yes?
Who'd like to take that?
Terry?
Well, I think sure. Melvin brings up some great points, and he's exactly right. But it isn't just the history of Austin, it's a history of transit. The transit history literally is funded on, a publicly funded, subsidized system to get working class folks into the areas where they needed to go to work. It's no different here in Austin. That's how it was originally founded. What we see today, though, is not only dependent riders, it's choice riders. It's folks that are choosing to not use traditional modes of transportation and getting in their own vehicle. Melvin's absolutely right. We have to have a comprehensive plan that impacts everyone, that allows folks who are still transit dependent and rely upon that transportation every single day to get to work, to get their kids to school, to get to the grocery store, still have that in place. And I absolutely am supportive of that. And that's not something that I believe that we're heading in a direction of forsaking one over the other. I think we can do both.
I want to get Terry Mitchell in on this, the Take on Traffic chair at the Greater Austin Chamber of Commerce, with the perspective of rail from perhaps the business community.
It needs to make economic sense. But it's also, it's a two-pronged approach, and I'll relay a little bit of what Councilmember Martinez said. Rail without proper planning isn't going to be real effective, but rail with proper planning has the ability to be very effective. If you look at some studies, they routinely show that roughly half of the population living within a half mile of a rail station take that rail. They move there for that rail, and they go to work in that way. But if we don't put people at our rail stations and plan for that, or don't put employment at our rail stations and plan for that, we won't get a lot of ridership. So we have to go hand in hand.
Thank you, Terry. We want to remind everyone that we have a live chat going on, so we're getting a lot of feedback from people who aren't here but are online listening, and we thank you all for handling some of those questions as well for us. But I know we've got some more audience members who have questions as well, Katina.
We've got quite a few lined up. Tony Rayner has lived here since 1977. She lives in the 78723 zip code near LBJ High School. Thank you for being here.
Hi there, thank you. Some of the problems that I see would be if we could get, for instance, get the buses doing a little more of the ring, get an actual web of buses. I get ready to try to take a bus, and I have to go like 4 miles this way, and then 3 miles this way to actually go 2 miles away. If you could rebuild the structure of the bus system so you get a little more ring traffic, I think it would be very helpful. And a big bottleneck for me is I-35 at Riverside, that I think some of it could be solved by moving the speed limit signs. You wait, and you're going northbound on 35, and then you hit the turn and banking, and now it goes down to 55 miles an hour. If you could move the sign south, where you're slowing down a mile earlier before you hit the wall, maybe you wouldn't have as many wrecks there. And personally, I think it would be nice if we could extend the upper deck from the University of Texas area south of Riverside, maybe even hook it in at Woodward, so people could get onto that upper deck, have a nice straight shot, and maybe avoid that death turn into south downtown.
Sounds like she has two topics that she's concerned about. One, Capital Metro, which we'll talk to Linda Watson about that, but construction projects, we'll talk to Carlos Lopez, who's a TxDOT engineer.
The talk about extending the upper deck has been around for a long time. There's been two sides to that coin. Many people have considered the upper deck a barrier to our community. And we don't know if we could get through an environmental process where people would actually accept an upper deck being run all the way south of the river. It's a good conversation we need to have. And of course, as John mentioned earlier, just the financing of something like that is something we'd have to try to tackle.
Can you speak to the upper decks, the ones that are under construction right now? Why do they take so long? Some of the decks on South Austin off 35, some of the on-ramps and off-ramps have been under construction for a while. People want to know, why isn't it ready yet?
Are we talking about Ben White?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Ben White's going to be done probably by the end of November, early December. And that job is actually being completed in about 20 months compared to the first job that was done in about 4 years. So I think they've done a lot better on their schedule than they did a long time ago. Over at MOPAC and 290, we had a situation where our first contractor filed bankruptcy, so we lost about 2 months. They got a new contractor on board. They're making great progress now. Those flyovers should be open in the March or April timeframe.
We'll talk to Linda Watson about making the bus schedules and bus routes a little bit more seamless.
My goal is to have very high capacity, frequent bus service on the major corridors with smaller neighborhood vehicles circulating in the neighborhoods and feeding into those major high capacity routes. And we're working on that. I also want to add technology to the mix to make our system as attractive as possible to people who have a choice but want better options than taking their private automobile. So we're working on a lot of things right now that I think the community will be happy with down the road in the future.
How far into the future?
Well, it's probably 3 years before we start our first bus rapid transit line, which will be operational on North Lamar and South Congress. And that, I think, will give people a taste for high frequency bus service that can change the signal lights so that it gets a green light to move on through and be competitive with the automobile in time and travel for the public.
So thank you. Robert Leslie?
Robert, I want to just take a quick second. What she's, I think what she's referring to is not uncommon. It's called cellular transit. It's kind of like a wagon wheel approach. But again, it takes roads, it takes that infrastructure to create that cellular system. So we have to have that multimodal approach. We have to remain committed to expanding our infrastructure roadway as well as improving our bus system. But I think your idea is very well taken.